This is a reaction and commentary to the child support ruined TechLead's life. He lost, in parentheses, as a millionaire. Let's go ahead and switch over. And yes, this is at the request of a viewer.
Oh my God, I lost my child support case. This is going to destroy me. I have to pay like $5,000 per month in child support for the next 15 years or
Immediately, as soon as I hear $5,000 per month, my brain multiplies that by 18, just to determine how much this person is making per month. That would be in Nevada. I think he's in California. But right away, that's what I think. And that's assuming he only has one child.
something like that. So my retirement is out of the window now. I was going to retire last week actually, but it seems like I'm back onto YouTube now, churning out these videos. And I wanted to
Yeah, imputation of income, that's what jumps out at me. Is he wanted to retire, but potentially it would have dropped his income, and then of course the court would not be happy with that. Why are you not working? Your income isn't as high as it could have been, and therefore we're going to impute your income. You can learn about this stuff in the video child support. I think that's what I call it. I think it's just called child support. Let's keep going.
explain for you the child support situation for you. I recently lost my case because you too may find yourself having to pay child support someday, whether intentionally or even unintentionally, as what happens to many sports superstars. And I'll explain for you the calculations here. But before I begin, I want to clarify for you what happened. About 3 years ago, my Japanese wife just one day took our son, 3 years old at the time, and abducted him, taking him off to Japan.
Okay, before I talk about this abduction thing, I need to correct myself. I would multiply his child support by 18, but it's not really. It's 18%, so it's more of a proportional. It's not really multiplying it by 18. It's like around, it's approximately times 5. So sorry about that. That's still a lot of money though. For a month, it's 5 times 5, roughly 25K per month is his income. This abduction thing is a problem. I've talked about it before in the video child abduction fears, and then I have another video on that treaty. I forgot the name of the treaty again. I always want to say the Hague Treaty. I'm not sure that that's what it is, because I know that's a military thing. It may also be a treaty involving abduction of children, but I feel bad to not be 100% sure of what the title of it is or what the name of it is. But yeah, there is a treaty, and I did the video on how you can use it to get a foreign country to order the child returned, which, from what I've seen, is not usually what happens. And there's even states reports, United States, I don't know what department does it. Probably the Department of State, maybe another department, I don't know. They do these reports and they analyze each of these countries to see which one of them is in compliance with the treaty. And you'd be surprised to see how many of them are not in very good compliance with the treaty. But yeah, one of the problems with these situations is somebody could end up paying child support when they can literally do nothing to enforce their custody orders. And this is the rare situation where I actually feel bad for them. Because in other situations, people run off with a child and they just run to another state in the US and they can still get it taken care of. The other state will typically recognize your state's custody orders. There's extradition. We had a case in Nevada where somebody ran off and was arrested in Tennessee and hauled all the way back to Nevada and subjected to criminal charges. But things get really tricky when they leave to another country. So if his situation is that he had a custody order and his ex took the child and ran off to Japan and then got him to pay child support, basically violating the United States custody order whilst at the same time exploiting the United States child support enforcement divisions, I would feel terrible for him, and I wish they would do something about this because it's a problem. But I have a suspicion that there probably wasn't any custody order at all here. There was probably nothing. And she just took the child and ran off to Japan, and that was sort of the court that instituted the proceedings. Still, it's a problem, especially if there's this competition over who's going to have jurisdiction, but it's not quite as egregious as somebody who already had proceedings open in the US, especially if the other person even participated in them. And then they just basically became a sore loser. They lost, they didn't like that judge, they said, screw this, I'm just running off to my home country. And then what are you going to do about it? So interesting that he's pointing this out. If it's true, I feel really bad for him, and it depends on to what extent he litigated in the US, if at all.
And About a year ago, I lost contact with them and she has been blocking access ever since. So recently, she came after me, hiring an American lawyer, and went after me for child support. And she's still out there in Japan. Now, this is not a video meant to trash her or anything like that. Like I'm just here to try to educate you that value is what I'm trying to provide for you. So this really isn't a personal video. And, some people, by the way, are going to say I'm a deadbeat dad. I want to clarify that, my son was the most important thing to me in my life. He was the one thing I could not lose. The most important element in my life that left me very much traumatized. And many fathers who end up losing their children do end up unliving, so to speak. And so really the fact that I'm even here alive and somewhat productive is a feat in and of itself that requires tremendous emotional willpower.
Okay, so the suicide thing is a thing. There are statistics on this. It's true. And usually it's not just losing the kids. And usually it's not just custodial interference. It's usually that combined with forcing the person to be a wage slave. So it's one thing if you just take the kids and run. But when you take the kids, run, and then subject them to child support in a way that makes them feel like the system is making you make a mockery of the system. The system is just a complete hellscape for them because it's not giving them any of the rights that they're entitled to, while at the same time taking all of their money and making it very difficult to live. In fact, especially if it's to the extent that they can't enter a new relationship, because it's making it such that to be in a new relationship with them is very difficult because they have to give up so much money to the ex. So all of these things combined, I think, are typically what lead to the suicide situation. But he's right about that. It's true.
A lot of people say that I refer to my son in the third person as the child rather than my child. And the reason for that is because it just makes it too personal and emotional for me sometimes to talk about this matter.
Okay, I used to actually be big on this. I used to say you should always refer to the child as our child, our child, our child. But after a few years, well, not a few years, after like half a decade, I can see now why people would use the phrase my child or the child. And I don't think it's a great idea to look too much into that. For me, initially, when I started this channel, that was like a big red flag. Now, at best, it's a yellow flag. So I just don't give as much weight to that anymore.
An emotional card rather than me being inhumane for any reason. But really, this is the thing. Whatever you value the most, your spouse will learn your weaknesses, what you treasure, and take that away from you in a bitter divorce when they're angry at you because they want to retaliate against you.
I think this is only characteristic of high conflict cases. There are a lot of cases, more than half, where people amicably resolve their divorce and child custody issues. They don't even go to court, or if they do go to court, they don't even go to a hearing. They just do it all through the paperwork and get an order to get spit out. And they just walk away with that piece of paper and many times don't even comply with it. They just raise their kids together without any issues. So what he's describing, in my opinion, is a high conflict child custody situation / high conflict divorce. And in those situations, yes, that's exactly what's going to happen. He's right.
If I did not love my son, she probably would see no reason to block access, right? There would be no point in doing that. But because I do, she knows she can use that as leverage against me and to just exact pain upon me. And maybe that's really the post-breakup game, right? The other person blames you for having married them, for having proposed to them, because it turned out that they just wasted their time. You weren't who they thought they would be. You deceived them. You didn't play up to their entire expectations and imaginations of what a wonderful knight you would be. It turns out you're human after all. But let me tell you what happened with child support court. I basically walked into the courtroom and I just lost. I got slaughtered in there. Here's what happened. Quick pause. This video is brought to you by DeFi Pro, the sleep, and it is, in my opinion, I began by hiring an attorney like any normal person would, and there's all these paperwork you have to file. I ended up blowing through $25,000 to $30,000 of money within just 1 month, and it didn't even get me up to the trial.
Okay, that's actually a good price. No. Yeah, actually, that's a good price for a millionaire. So he's saying it didn't get into the trial. So I'm assuming what he means by that is it got him the initial pleadings, and it also got him the discovery, which is what most of the expense is going to be at that point. I don't know. I feel like for a more, I don't want to say reasonably, for an attorney who's on the lower end, let's just use that phrase because he's a millionaire and we have to have some way of comparing. Probably it would be closer to $15,000, maybe 10 if you're lucky, but more likely $15,000. For a millionaire to spend $25,000 on discovery and the paper and the initial pleadings, to me that sounds pretty normal. It really does. Now, he's going to still have to pay for trial. And if he's paid $25K to get up to this point, it's probably going to be another $25K, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was $50 or $75K to get him through the trial. And then for the lower priced attorney, I would pretty much typically say $25K for the trial. So a lot of times these amounts seem like they're completely impossible to imagine, but it is a lot of work for these attorneys, and they do charge incredibly high hourly rates.
Ended up firing these people because what happens is once you retain them, you have to pay $5,000-$10,000. As soon as you show them your finances, and if you're a higher earner, they say, you know what, we need double the retainer right away, and they just start billing you for everything. If they send an email, 10-word email, it's $40 for that, and they just bill you everywhere. If they have a conversation with a colleague about your case, it's another several $100s, even though.
Yeah, aggressive billing. So this is not common with all attorneys. I don't know if I would even say most of them do this. Probably at least half of them do this, where they just bill you for everything that they possibly can. And that's just a standard practice in the industry to do that. And they're unapologetic about it. If you don't like it, too bad. That's what they're going to do. They're just going to bill you for everything that they possibly can. There are some lawyers who are more flexible about that. I know they exist. They're not that rare. But I feel like half is a good approximation for me. Half of them bill you aggressively, and the other half feel bad about that and they don't. You're still going to get billed a lot, but maybe not as aggressively as he's describing.
So you didn't ask them to have that conversation. If you have a conference call and two of the attorneys of the firm show up, then you get billed at 2x the rate. And the rate is typically $400, $500 per hour. If it's a good attorney, it could be as high as $800 per hour. And you really have to be careful about these attorneys, because sometimes the other party can come and ask you to also pay for their attorney fees. So you could be.
Yeah, I think in Nevada we call those sergeant fees. I'm not 100% sure about that. That's for marriages. And that's because of the community asset problem. So you're in a divorce, but you haven't divorced yet. So all of the assets that you feel you have, because you're the one that's making all the money, aren't really just yours. They're community assets, including your wage and all that. So what he's describing is a situation where the court can order you to pay your ex's attorney fees, even though you're not really an ex. She's not really an ex yet. You haven't divorced yet. So really, from his perspective, it's the court forcing you to pay. But really, from the court's perspective, it's using the community assets in a way that's fair to both sides. There are other curious issues where this can come up in unmarried cases, but this particular person was married, so I'm not going to go into those.
Paying 2x the hours. If it's like an $800 attorney for both sides, it's as high as $1,600 per hour. And so the legal system, the way it really works is if you and the other spouse cannot work together to figure this out, then they're just going to drain your finances until both of you can figure something out. So in my view, the legal system is not built to try to help you or to find justice, but rather to just drain your money as fast as possible until one of you just say, you know what, we're just going to give up, or we're going to just settle on something because this is too much financial pain for us to take.
Or sometimes it's not even a decision. Sometimes both sides run out of money and both lawyers want to withdraw, leaving the parties all, by their lonesome, and then they're sort of forced because they've both lost counsel. I'm not going to say that this is every single attorney out there. I've talked to a lot of attorneys, including family court lawyers, and most of it is because of my work on our Nevada judges. And what he's describing isn't every single attorney, but it is a lot of them. From what I have heard, based on my personal experiences are difficult because I didn't have an attorney most of the time. But from what I've heard from my friends who are family court lawyers and also litigants who've gone through this, most of the cases involve at least one lawyer who's doing this. And it is a problem because the other lawyer, there's very little that they can do to get that lawyer to knock it off. It's not a thing that you can really call out to the court, but sometimes the judges on their own will realize it and do something about it. Oftentimes they won't. It's just a disappointing reality of what the system turned into, which is it's less about people's rights and more about operating a business. And the really bad cases involve both lawyers doing it. But I don't get I don't feel like this is what's happening. I feel like in most cases it's at least one lawyer. In some cases, neither lawyer is doing it, and the cases run very smoothly. And it's just one of those. It's just one of the ugly things that I feel like after decades and decades and decades, slowly but surely, the system evolved, or you could say devolved, into what he is describing. Um, I don't know. I mean, that could be something that we talk about in another video maybe someday. It's really, I hate to use the word interesting because it sounds callous, but it's interesting to see how the policies surrounding the family court system, statutes and rules both, the culture and how it's changed, and especially the secrecy of how it works. All of these things contributed to what we have today. They were the ingredients that led to what we have. It's not like a conspiracy or anything. It's just an evolution/devolution. Let's continue.
Take as a family, we just can't afford it. Somebody has to give in at that point. The other thing to note is that mediation is very difficult. I made a back of the envelope calculation of how much I believed my wife would deserve. I doubled that and I said, here, take over $1 million. Just take it, be happy. Let's just move on with our lives. Very happy people. But the problem is, since she does not know what is the fair amount, any amount that you offer, she's going to say, maybe I deserve more than this. How do I know this is the right amount?
Right. That's what he's saying. And then she'll involve counsel, and then counsel could manipulate her. I'm thinking that's what he's going to lead into.
Let's get a judge or attorney to actually stamp this. And so it's very difficult to reach any agreement. So you kind of end up being sucked into the whole legal system, whether you like it or not, and all of your funds goes into the attorneys.
That's because it does not take two to tango. It's a myth. A lot of people say it takes two to tango. It's not true. They need to shut that up. It only takes one to tango when it comes to litigation. It only takes one person to force it to occur.
Oh, and also, the moment lawyers are involved, they tell you not to talk to each other anymore because they'll take it from here. And that makes reaching any type of agreement even more difficult because nobody's talking anymore, and the lawyers are going to just rack up the fees as much as they can and continue dragging out that conversation for as long as possible. In many ways, it makes the situation even worse. Not to mention, I don't think a single child abducted to Japan, which is the black hole of child abduction, like so many kids get abducted there, I don't think a single child has ever.
Okay, let me pause this. European Parliament urged Japan to comply with international rules on child protection and to allow for joint parental custody after a number of European citizens were denied access to children by Japanese mothers. Okay, yeah, so it doesn't talk about the treaty. As far as I know, Japan is not a signatory to the treaty. Unless something very recent occurred, they are not a signatory. And note that they mentioned Japanese mothers, because if some rando ran off to Japan, I highly doubt Japan would protect that person. But it's not a rando; it's a Japanese citizen that runs back to Japan. This is just something that's just going to keep happening. I'm not even sure why they waste their time. It's just other countries feel very differently, very, very differently about child custody situations, and it's not a shock to me that this occurs. If you want to know more, watch my video on the topic child abduction fears.
Been returned. So any legal recourse, it's not even enforceable. So here's how child support works. It's actually pretty simple, only based on a mathematical formula. How much money do you make and how much time you spend with the child. That's it. And it's an entirely different case than, say, divorce and custody. So, it doesn't really matter if the other person abducted the kid to Japan for whatever reason and just blocked all access.
Maybe. If you want if you want to learn more, watch my video on the topic comedy. And I'm not sure if an attorney has ever pulled that off. But it is the ability to get a court in the United States to refuse to recognize a court order from another country. And it's complicated. It's rooted in common law. There's a lot to it. And I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know his case. He doesn't have my docket video up, my docket series with his case from beginning to end with the filings and the hearings. So who knows what's actually going on in this case. But that's a big maybe. Let's keep going. Now, hold on. Let me say one extra thing. Yes, I do believe he's correct. If somebody abducted your child and ran off with your child to another state in the United States, yes, I do believe that you easily could be required to pay child support, because what the judge is going to say is, hold on a second, your rights are separate from your obligations. If you are upset that they violated the court's order, then you need to fix that yourself. Enforce it, bring them back to court for contempt, solve the problem. It's different when it's another country, because you're going to say, hey, I've done everything I can, and they just take the court orders, the U.S. court orders, crumple them up and throw them away. But when you're in the U.S. and somebody doesn't let you see your child, or they run off with your child to another state, the judges are just not going to look that much into that, because they're going to say, you can deal with that. We have a system in place for you to deal with that. You're not completely helpless.
None of that really matters whether it's right or wrong. People just come and say, we don't care what happened. How much money do you make? And then we're going to have you pay a percentage of that. And so each state is a little bit different, but if you come into the guideline calculator for California, you can actually plug in some numbers and you'll see that, there's really two things that matter. How much money you make, we can put in, say, 70,000 per month, just as an example, and then the percentage of time that you spend with the child. So, if you spend 0% time, then you end up paying more. If you spend a lot of time, then you pay less. So let's say you spend 0% of the time, earn $70,000 per month. Based on that, you would pay $5,300 per month in child support. Now, if you...
Yeah, he's right. It's formulaic. It is formulaic. And there are what they call deviations. Yeah, child support deviations. So there's ways to get it to be nudged upwards and downwards using deviations. But for the most part, it's a formula. And he's right about it being different with every state. That's true.
If you were to spend 50% of the time with the kid, the calculation would be about $4,000 per month. So parents are actually incentivized to block access, to block as much visitation and take 100% time with the child in order to maximize the amount of money that they would receive. So this is an ugly reality, really posing.
Let's pause for a second. This is a very interesting point he makes, because this was actually something that the Supreme Court of Nevada wrestled with. When they published the original Rivero decision in 2008, you did compute the percentages of time, and it was factored into the formula. And the Supreme Court took their 2008 Rivero decision, withdrew it, and replaced it with the 2009 Rivero decision, where they recognized that was a problem. It was a concern enough that they did not want to continue with that precedent. So they discarded it. So now you still have somewhat of a power struggle, because the custodial labels do impact child support enormously, but it's not to the point where people get into the minutia of the precise percentage of time. And if you want to learn more about that, just read both the 2008 and 2009 Rivero decisions in Nevada, and you'll see that debate occur with the Supreme Court of Nevada, I guess, between themselves, realizing that that's something that they didn't want and changing it and explaining why. It's pretty consistent with what this father is raising.
A conflict of interest towards family values, and explains why many people say children are being used as pawns in family court to maximize financial value for one partner or the other. But regardless, if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, I would recommend to stay in the household. Don't just move out thinking you're going to get some peace for everybody and you'll figure it out later on, because the family court is going to maintain whatever that status quo is. If you want to stay with the kids and get some custody, you need to stay with them and just go back to that household, even if there's conflict.
So he's wrong about that, and I discuss why in the video separation phase. If there is no conflict, I guess that's fine. And he is right that the status quo situation is a real problem, and it shouldn't be. I don't think the judges think very much into it, and they don't. It's a problem. It's a major problem. But if you watch the video separation phase, you'll see why I don't recommend doing what he's saying, because if there's conflict and they're trying to frame you for some kind of domestic violence something, you're taking a huge risk. Even if you're doing everything in your power to avoid them and not look like you're threatening them, they can still lie. And when you go to court in civil cases, it's preponderance of the evidence. They don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you did something to them. And a lot of times there are situations where the court just isn't sure, and they'll just say, you know what, let's play better safe than sorry. I'm going to go ahead and make a finding that this did occur. So it's risky to do what he's saying. If there's any kind of violence, lies, deceit, anything like that, you should get out. Get out, and just do not put yourself in any situation where you're in a private location with them, because you're just setting yourself up for failure if you do that. And I think I talk about in the video separation phase that once you move out, you should immediately institute proceedings, because if you don't, then the longer that you wait, the more you make it plausible that you just abandoned the child. And a lot of people just don't know how to use the court system. They just aren't sure what to do. And they're not abandoning the child. They just don't know what to do. But I think it's the safest way to minimize the chance of you being framed for some kind of thing that you didn't do, while at the same time showing the court that you immediately wanted to assert your rights, that you didn't leave and then just abandon them, but that you left and immediately sued. It's a frustrating reality of these types of cases, high conflict cases.
The person gets mad, starts shouting, telling you to get out of the house, Just pull out your phone, record it, don't touch them, and just continue recording, but don't vacate that house. All right, now here's the thing I wanted to show you about child support. Let's say you make $10,000 per month. That's about 120K income per year, which is maybe typical for Silicon Valley. Based on that, you would be paying about $1,700 in child support with a total of about $6,800 in take-home pay after the 30-some% tax rate. But really, child support comes out to about 25% of your net pay. In higher tax brackets, maybe it's anywhere from 15 to 20%, but in this range, it's 25%. Now, you need to consider also there's rent, right? Most people actually pay about 50% of their net income in rent. And this is based on those typical rent calculators, whether you're using the 40x rule where your annual income needs to be 40x monthly rent, or you're using the 30% rule where you're saying you can put 30% of your annual income into rent, but it all assumes you're putting about 50% of your after-tax income into rent. Child support will take another 25%, and then the last 25% you get. So really, it's about half to say a third of your net disposable income that's going into child support. It's essentially the maximum amount that they can take from you for you to still be half motivated to continue working. And that's the other thing. Once you get a child support order on you, it may be very difficult to retire because people assume you're going to be bringing in this income year after year. And so if you suddenly say you want to just retire and stop working, people are going to say, no, you got to keep working. Why is your income dropping? You're capable of working. Get back to work.
Yeah, this is the imputation of income thing that I talked about. You can learn about this in the video child support.
Can't just take a break. You have an obligation to continue bringing in this income, whatever it was established at. You can try to lower that, right? But people are going to ask, why are you lowering it? Are you taking a break? You're capable of working. But I think one of the interesting things about this calculation is it's not based on what the child needs. You know, some celebrities are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars per month in child support. What child actually needs that much money for support is simply based on a percentage of your earning income. And so this can even be an amount sufficient to retire on for some people, right? Like if I'm paying $5,000 per month, that's actually not taxed for the other person. That's equivalent to about 100K annual income. That's what a good job is going to pay you simply for child support. And so this is why a lot of the celebrity sports stars, football players are coached not to just get with random people because they could be taken in for a ride on child support, which will last typically until the child reaches age 18 or so. And I also wanted to note, at least for my situation, it was not sufficient for me to say I have a separate business. I have a separate LLC company for my YouTube stuff, for my other businesses. People just imputed all of that income on me. They didn't separate it. And they even took a look at some of my business expenses like travel expenses, and they said, you know what, this is all going to be not considered, and they're going to consider that part of income as well. They wouldn't accept that as business expenses. They looked at rent that my business would be paying to my parents, right? Like, you know, I rent space for my parents. They said, you know what, we don't believe it. You're just living with your parents. So even that was not considered a legitimate business expense. So they just imputed a lot of income on me. So the courts can be ruthless. Maybe in my situation, people just said, hey, that's a YouTube channel. That's not a real business. YouTube isn't a real business. Therefore, we're not going to allow any of those business separations or protections. Maybe I didn't hire a good enough lawyer, but in either case, you know, the money has never been important for me. I just wanted to get to a point where my ex-wife would be somewhat appeased and just get to some settlement. Any agreement is fine by me. I'm perfectly happy having a cup of coffee at home playing video games, so it wouldn't change my life one way or another. And for those people who are saying I should get into this huge legal court battle and fight for my rights, you know, I just don't believe that a legal victory is a personal victory. Right? Like legally, you can win whatever you want, but if it leaves everybody just bitter and angry, I would not consider that a victory necessarily. And last of all, well, it is just money after all. And you know what they say, if your only problem is money, then you don't have a problem. But that'll do for me. Hope you enjoyed the episode.
All right, yeah, it's I think it's a millionaire's perspective, but at the same time, most of what I went over was completely applicable to everybody else. The only thing I would add is he is right that it's not connected to the amount needed to raise a child. It's not. It's connected to establishing a financial equilibrium between the households. I think that's the phrase that they use, the formal phrase. So, I mean, I don't know what you can really do about that, though, because it goes both ways. So, like, you could say, hey, it needs to be based on the amount to raise a child only. which is very beneficial to millionaires and people who make a lot of money, because then it becomes a very small portion of their income. But at the same time, that could be an impossible amount for people who are very poor. So people who just make almost no money at all. I don't know what to tell you guys about that. That's the policy. I don't really want to go into the policy of child support and why it's set to income percentages rather than what it's the amount needed to raise a child. Maybe in another video someday I can do that. But he is right about that. And that is just the way that the system is, as far as I know, in all 50 states. If you guys have any questions, feel free to post them down in the comments below. If you like this type of video, feel free to send me other videos that you'd like me to do commentary on that you think might be relevant to this channel.